There is freedom within, there is freedom without. Try to catch a deluge in a paper cup. There's a battle ahead, many battles are lost, but you never see the end of the road while you're traveling with me. Hey now, don't dream it's over. Hey now, when the world comes in, they come to build a wall between us. You know that they won't win. Now I'm towing my car, there's a hole in the roof. My possessions are causing me suspicion, but there's no proof. In the paper today tells a warrant of waste, but you turn right over to the TV page. Hey now, don't dream it's over. Hey now, when the world comes in, they come to build a wall between us. You know that they won't win. Walking again to the beat of the drum, and I'm counting the steps to the door of your heart. Only shadows ahead, barely clearing the roof. Get to know the feeling of liberation and relief. Hey now, don't dream it's over. Hey now, when the world comes in, they come to build a wall between us. You know that they won't win. La da 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 da, la da 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 da, la da 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 da, la da da da. Oh, let the wind don't
So hello and welcome to another Restore Live. Restore Live going out to the Restore platform. That's on Facebook, also to the British Unionist People's Voice on Facebook, to the Restore UK YouTube channel, and also to Restore UK on Twitter. Now, from those Facebook channels, what you can do is that you can share this platform. You can share it far and wide. Because I believe this evening we have a very, very important stream just about to happen. So tune in and don't forget to listen to the wording of what it is that we speak about, and maybe you'll learn a thing or two about politics, not from myself, but certainly from our guest this evening. This evening we have Professor Jon Tonge, a man from the University of Liverpool. He's a professor of Irish Studies at the University of Liverpool, and we've had Jon on this show before, and we had him really whenever the protocol came into being just a few years ago. We invited Jon to talk about why is it ever right, and this was the question, and we'll pose this again to Jon. But why is it ever right? When there's four constituent parts of the United Kingdom and everybody took part in the same referendum with the same questions, why is it ever right in a democracy to treat one constituent part differently and separately from three constituent parts? Why is it ever right to treat Northern Ireland in a different way from England, Scotland, and Wales? So, inviting on screen just now, we have Jon. And Jon, if you would just like to give a little introduction about your day-to-day job and what it is that you do at the University of Liverpool. Over to you, Jon.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thanks ever so much for the invitation, Jon. Delighted to speak. My job is Professor of British and Irish Politics at the University of Liverpool. So it's been a pretty busy last few years, analysing, amongst other things, the protocol and where that's taking unionism, where it's taking nationalism, where it's taking Northern Ireland more broadly. That really is the day job, and there's been a lot of speed reading over the last week, examining not the spin on the protocol from either the EU or the UK government, but also looking at some of the legal documentation associated with that protocol Mark II.
Yeah. Jon, I'm glad you mentioned that word spin, because that's something that I want to focus on, and I want really to really help people understand that sometimes what you see isn't actually what you're getting. Sometimes the promises that is being made by politicians, well, at best, sometimes they're close to the truth, is how that I would see it. So, Jon, we've just a half an hour with you. I know that you're a busy man, and thank you very much for coming on. So, we want to really get straight into this, Jon. But before that we go, that question: why is it ever right that three constituent parts would be treated differently than one constituent part, yet everybody took part in the same referendum? Could you answer that question, Jon?
Well, different parts of the UK are treated differently these days because of devolution. Wales has a different set of laws in some respects from those in England. Scotland is probably the most most powerful devolved parliament anywhere in the UK, and it therefore makes a lot of its own laws. And Northern Ireland sometimes has a functioning devolved government which can make its own laws, even though the executive's been missing in non-action for almost 40% of the time. Even here, even in Greater Manchester, there are different laws now devolved compared to Liverpool, for example, in terms of policing and who can hire and fire a chief constable. So there's no such thing as a central set of laws these days. Obviously, Northern Ireland is different in terms of the protocol, because it would be the only place in the UK still subject to EU law. And I would accept that makes it different from the other countries and regions that I've just mentioned. But in terms of uniformity across the UK, we've probably never been less uniform than we are now.
We talked about spin earlier. Of course, that wasn't spin, Jon. But anyway, I hope you got an answer, because I have to say I didn't. No, I'm teasing, Jon. I'm teasing. So, Jon, thank you very much for preparing. You prepared a little slide here, and we're going to focus on a couple of areas, and we're really going to get straight into it now. So I'm going to pop it up in front of us, and we're going to commence whenever. Sorry, I'm just going to hit it back a wee bit. That was my fault. So, okay, Jon, would you just like to explain what it is that is in front of us and why that it is that you put that together?
Yeah, if we can move on from the title slide to, first of all, just the Windsor framework. The next slide is just the cover of the document that the UK government issued. If we can move to that, Jon, not the tests. There should be another slide somewhere it says...
Jon, right, okay, here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one down that I've taken, right?
Okay.
And I'm going to hold on, I can do this.
Okay,
here we go. This is your one.
This is quite important. The reason I've showed this cover is because this is the UK government spin on the deal, the Windsor Framework, A New Way Forward. If you read that, you'd think it was the greatest deal ever. I mean, that's being offered to people of Northern Ireland. And at first reading, you think, wow, this is some deal. If you read it a second or third time, then you're perhaps less enamored by it. And it differs quite markedly in its interpretation of what Protocol Mark II or the Windsor framework actually consists of, compared to the EU spin. The European Union has issued its own sort of version of this, which sort of very much differs in emphasis. So that just shows how there can be different interpretations, spun interpretations of the same document. So that's why I flag it up. And the Windsor framework, it can't be read in isolation. You've got to go and then read what it actually says in law, actually in the text of the deal itself, rather than spin. So it's just something that you need to read beyond that. It's very tempting just to read this document because it's quite an easy read. It's only 20 odd pages compared to 200 pages of almost impenetrable legalese, but it's insufficient to do that. So that's why I flagged that up. So if we can move on to the actual protocol itself and how we measure this, okay? The obvious point to, or starting point, is really to measure the deal against the DUP 7 tests that have been set. If we can get them up, don't know if we can go to them, John. Yeah. Okay, so there you are. I thought it'd be useful to put them in front of everyone to see that. But it's rather like sometimes what I say to my students when I set an exam or essay question, I say, there's no outright right or wrong answer here. It's not sort of black and white. And perhaps the DUP has framed the tests on that basis, but it's actually quite hard to flunk the tests. And in another way, it's quite hard to pass some of these tests. So if we go through each of them, very, conscious of the time, any new arrangements, first of all, fulfill Article 6 of the Act of Union. Well, Article 6 of the Act of Union basically says that people in, putting it in simple terms, people in Northern Ireland should be treated the same as anywhere else in the UK. And one answer to that would be, well, no, they're not, because they're still subject to EU law. The counter argument to that is, well, no place within the Union is treated exactly the same these days, because Scotland has different laws from Wales and different laws from Northern Ireland and the regions, the point I just made. So it's difficult. And also in terms of the Act of Union protecting people within the Union, well, coach and horses has been driven through the Act of Union over the years. I mean, a lot of people were put outside the Union back in 1920 with partition. So the idea of the Act of Union would necessarily be the custodian of the interests of British citizens within Northern Ireland is itself open to question. So yeah. I can see why it's put in. But
John, could we just focus on that there for a second? We want to drill into this here. You probably know myself and Clifford spent a bit of time at the Supreme Court, eat, sleeping, drinking and breathing all of this here. Yeah. And what we learned was that the British argument, the government's argument, was that the Act of the Union, it was disapplied. Now, my interpretation of the word disapplied would be like a handbrake on a car. You can disapply a handbrake and you can reapply it at some future point. And that seemed to be what they were indicating, that they did this in order to create the circumstances, the space and where that a deal could be arranged by the British government and the EU. Now, whenever we look at that Article 6, and you quite rightly said there, was that in Article 6 it says that the citizens of around the United Kingdom, they should be treated. What is it? The word is everyone should be on an equal footing would be the terminology that is used in Article 6. Now, I argue, and I've always argued, that is our rights as UK citizens. Now, if that can't be reinstated, and it isn't reinstated under this new Windsor framework deal, but if it can't be reinstated, then we are literally rudderless in terms of our rights, in terms of trade from within the United Kingdom. So I then go and further argue right now is that whilst that the EU are now governing, and I'll use that word quote unquote, governing our trade, and that's a fact, they are absolutely governing our trade with no say from the British government. I mean, it was the EU that dictated that we have a border in Larne, Belfast and Warren Point. It was the EU dictated that they wanted sight of the amount of goods, the type of goods that was travelling across that sea border. They have come to an arrangement whereby that they're going to give a digital copy of everything that flows through that border. So my argument would be, and this is a question in this argument, John, would be that if the DUP say that any new arrangement should fulfill Article 6 of the Act of Union. Now, I would have written that differently. I would have written that any new arrangement should restore fully Article 6 of the Act of Union, as opposed to that word fulfill. But I think that whoever wrote that, and it was Richard Bulick, is that how they say the second name? That I reckon that what that was designed to do was to allow for wriggle room for the DUP to compromise at a future date. Now, that word fulfill, here's how I see that, is that you see that the spirit of the premise of the Act of the Union could be fulfilled, but yet Act of the Union, Article 6 could remain in a disapplied state. And I think that was the spin that is in point number 1 within those new arrangements. John, would you like to comment on what I've just said?
Yeah, it comes back to your point about whether the people of Northern Ireland are put on an unequal footing and how unequal it is defined. Palpably, some of the trade arrangements relating to Northern Ireland will still be subject to some EU law. So in that sense, it's indisputable that there is the trade arrangement for Northern Ireland put you on a different footing. I'm not sure I'd necessarily use the word unequal, but I can see why you would use it. I agree with the ambiguity. I mean, how do you fulfill Article 6 of the Act of Union wholly? And if you don't offer further definition of how fulfillment is reached, and these are pretty basic tests, then you can argue the case both ways on that. I mean, I know that people like, I think it was Jamie Bryson said that only one of the 7 tests have been fulfilled. And this comes down to, interpretation of what do we mean by fulfilling Article 6 of the Act of Union. You are being treated differently. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
That continues. There's different treatment because you have an EU say in your trade arrangements that is different from elsewhere in the UK. Some would want that in Northern Ireland, of course. Some think that's the best of both worlds, etc. So I'm not sure you can wholly fulfill it. Is the answer to that? But equally,
number 2, John.
Okay, number 2. Okay. Here, avoid any diversion of trade. In terms of physical checks, I think this is a win for the DUP because everything will go down the green channel now. That in terms of GB to NI trade, there'll still be about 5% of goods checked ultimately on those goods. But I mean, there are checks. We can get too high bound by checks. I could recite to you the EasyJet timetable from Liverpool to Belfast, and I get checked before I get on a plane to come over. I have to show documentation. I have to show identification. I have to fill in details for EasyJet. Should I be resentful of that because I'm going from one part of the UK to another, or should I just accept it as well? That's how it is in order to be in transit. The fact is, it's a big improvement. This is where I think the document is good news, Protocol Mark 2, because really the checks will be kept to a minimum in terms of smuggling. And there always were some checks on goods going on livestock goods, for example, going between GB and NI. So there'll be none of this grandstanding that was there in Protocol Mark 1, in which everything could be subject to checks, and some stuff like medicines couldn't be brought in. Sausages, chilled meats couldn't be brought in. All that sort of nonsense from the original deal is now out of this one. And I think number 2 is the big win. Those who want to object to that would say, well, hang on, you might not be able to be accepted as a trusted trader to go to be accepted into the green channel, that is unfettered GB to NI trade. And secondly, you'll still have to fill in customs declarations, a 21 data field. But I think in terms of physicality, there won't be diversion for GB to NI only trade.
Again, just a quick take on that there would be avoid any diversion of trade. Well, yes, the diversions in trade is avoided as a result of a green lane with digital data supplied to the EU. It's an EU regulatory and customs border. It's an EU dictated regulatory and customs border. And really what it does is that it gives the governance of trade in Northern Ireland to the EU. So the United Kingdom is made up of 2 pieces. It's made up of the political union and the economic union. And right now, proposed under Windsor framework is that we give away the half of the union here in Northern Ireland, which is titled economic union. So again, John, on to number 3. I reckon.
Well, at the points you've just made, I think mean that test 3 is failed.
Yeah.
I think two in terms of a physical border disappears now largely for GB to NI trade, but there still will be a border in the REC. And I always thought that test 3, as phrased, you couldn't achieve it because there was always going to still be a border in the REC for goods going GB to NI and onwards into the EU single market, because the EU will defend the integrity of its own internal market. So there will still be physical checks on goods at border control posts in Northern Ireland. There will
John,
still be
would I have been right in arguing from day one that fulfill means that the Act of the Union can remain in a disapplied state? Avoid means that a green channel with an EU regulatory border can still be there. Then that means that that fulfills number 3, which is that it does not constitute a border in the REC. But really, it does constitute a border in the REC because it's an EU regulatory dictated border with trusted trader scheme, with certification for the trusted traders to be in that trusted trader scheme, with declarations to be made on the goods, which is digitally supplied to the look. Again, what we're trying to say to people is don't believe what you're hearing from Chris Egan-Harris, from Rishi Sunak, and from all of those. I'm going to say the Sunak oil salesman who would be trying to sell this Windsor framework and dressing. Look, we can handle truth, John. We can handle truth, but we can't. Look. Years of betrayal in Northern Ireland has taught us to smell betrayal, and even before it comes. I mean, why do you think that we're so sharp on these things now? And you must see it. That there's a lot of people from within our community right now who are just as like me, like the likes of Jamie Bryson, whoever. There's a lot of people now that is over every single detail, wanting to crawl over every single word to understand what that word means, because that's the way things need to be done, because we have been subjected to constructive ambiguity before. And it turns out when we reach for the safeguards in Article 1 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998, in where that it says that there couldn't be constitutional change without a referendum being put to the people. Well, what we find is that this, make no mistake, is constitutional change. Whenever the union is made up of 2 pieces, economics and the political union. And right now, under this deal, governance of the economic union is handed to the EU, lock, stock, and barrel. Number 4, John.
Okay. Give the people of Northern Ireland a say in the laws which govern them. This was a low bar test, because anything really could constitute the people of Northern Ireland a say in the laws which govern them. New law, that does apply to new EU laws. There will be the Stormont break. Now, the Stormont break, you can pick holes in it for sure. First of all, the UK has got to approve 30 or more unionists putting the brakes on by raising concerns over a new law that's going to be applied. I don't think that will be the problem that some unionists are suggesting. I think the UK government will run with the ball should the unionists kick it towards them. But, and it's a big but, the problem is the EU may say to the UK government, well, we don't accept your objections to this new EU law, and we are therefore going to take retaliatory measures, unspecified retaliatory measures according to the deal. So the new EU laws may be put to a cross-community vote. That's not yet been absolutely confirmed and nailed down, but it may well be. So it's a sort of break stroke veto potentially on new laws. In terms of existing law, whilst quite a bit of it has been removed by Protocol Mark II, there isn't really a say other than that the Assembly gets to vote on whether to maintain the protocol ultimately. But I think it's that test can be easily passed. You can always say, well, yes, they've got a say of sorts. It depends how strong you want that say to be.
So, I mean, I could literally just quickly give my take on this here again. And John, I really, really appreciate this, because really what we're doing here is that we're comparing what an expert like yourself in politics or in a political professor would actually say about these things. And then I will give my take, and what we'll do is we'll create some little video clips, we'll pass them out. And what we're going to try to do is show people what different opinions actually say about these things. But number 4, give the people a say in making the new laws which govern them. Okay, so the say has been given through Stormont, through the thing called Stormont break. I'm going to say the Stormont break, give me a break. If this is what you're trying to pass off as a say in the laws which govern Northern Ireland, and I'll say this is that there was a diagram which was produced on this Stormont break with a Stormont break with an arrow going to let's say that 30 petitioners from 2 separate parties managed to get this petition together. What they do is that we don't like that law, we're not having it. It goes to what I understand to be like an arbitration between the British government and the petitioners. If it can be solved at that stage, then it is solved at that stage. If it can't be solved at that stage, then the government then need to take a stance. Well, we agree with it, we don't agree with it. Let's say the government agree with it. What I understand is that, as per what Ursula von der Leyen said, and I would still have to see the legal text on this, but then it passes to the ultimate arbiter on the EU single market. Now, remember, is that we are part of the EU single market. The EU have complete governance over the EU single market. The ECJ has the final say on matters of the EU single market. And I would say that what you see in number 4 there isn't giving the people of Northern Ireland a say in the laws which govern them. Number 5, John. Number 5.
Number 5, I think, is passed. I don't think there'll be checks, physical checks. I think that even the 5% will be checks that are proposed. 10% dropping to 5% by 2025. I think they'll gradually be dropped. So I actually think that that's the least ambiguous test, and I think that one is passed. Okay.
Agree. Well, agree. Just resulting in no checks and goods going from NI to GB, but there is checks in terms of the digital data that is being supplied. Now, what we learned yesterday was there's a French company now that has taken up the contract to monitor the border and to look after the border and to deliver the checks and everything that goes with the border in Belfast, Larne and Warrenpoint, slap bang in the middle of the United Kingdom. Without getting into that, we haven't got much time. This is the one that really stuck out to me from a long time ago, and I've been saying this for a very long time. John, would you just like to give your take on number 6, please?
Yeah, this is the one that is studiously avoided both in the spin documents that accompany the legal text and within the document itself, because you can't ensure there's no new regulatory border developing between NI and the rest of the UK unless you guarantee that UK law will never diverge from EU law. What happens if the UK government, for whatever reason, decides to have different standards of goods from the EU? Then there will be problems for Northern Ireland firms making goods, because they would have to adhere to EU standards rather than UK standards. And there's nothing in the document about that. So to me, that's failed. That test is failed because this document, this revised protocol, doesn't ensure what is demanded there.
John, without me sort of giving the take on that, and I'll come back at the end, but just number 7, you go ahead with number 7 there.
Yeah, preserve the letter and spirit of the Belfast Agreement by requiring consent. I know you'll disagree with this, but Northern Ireland's position in the United Kingdom is guaranteed under the Good Friday Agreement. The terms of the Good Friday Agreement say the Secretary of State can call a border poll, but he or she can only call one when there's a majority for constitutional change. There clearly isn't yet, and that keeps Northern Ireland in the UK. I know you may come back on me and by saying, well, Northern Ireland's position in the UK is being hollowed out by this protocol, but in formal terms, at least, I don't think Northern Ireland's position in the UK is jeopardised by the deal. You can make a case, if this works in economic terms, it may diminish support for a united Ireland. So I think in very formal constitutional terms, this makes no difference, because ultimately only the people of Northern Ireland can vote Northern Ireland out of the UK.
Yeah, John, I'm conscious you've got to go, and we'll release you in a few moments. I just want to give a little summary of what it was that we were just talking about there. So again, looking at those tests, how many tests have been met?
One, I'd give a little tick to. I'm not sure you can answer one, actually. Okay, number one, question mark. avoid any diversion trade, I give a tick to. 3, it's failed. People in Northern Ireland, a little tick I give to 4. So summarising it, the ones that have been fail there are 3, because there still will be a border in the Irish Sea, and 6. They, to me, are the 2 that are clearly failed. There's ambiguity over another 2, and I'd say about 3 were passed. Yeah.
Yeah. So one more question on those arrangements there, and it was always my claim that these were written in constructive ambiguity to allow for wriggle room, to allow for compromise.
I agree with that. Yeah.
You agree with that?
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree that they were written in a way that you could, some of those tests that they're not that rigorous. There isn't a right or wrong answer or a definitive answer to some of them, not all of them, but to some of them. And yeah, they probably were framed in that way.
So number 6, I mean, this is the one that really stuck out to me, and with all the problems that comes with number 6, as you say, whenever there's new EU directives, EU laws coming into Northern Ireland, it is an absolute constitutional, or it's a trade nightmare, because we'll focus on trade right now, because that's what it is. Now, in number 6, John,
just to say, John, it's not about new EU laws necessarily. Number 6, it's about what happens if the UK decides to diverge from the EU. That could leave traders in Northern Ireland in something of a bind. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
So, no new regulatory borders developed. Does that mean, John, that the existing borders under the protocol can be there, but there's no new borders that has to come in? Take away that word "new." No regulatory borders develop in between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Put in that word "new," and it means something completely different. Is that the constructive ambiguity there in that word "new"?
I think it comes back to, yes, there's a regulatory border in the sense that there's a customs regime for GB to NI goods, given the EU customs control. That's silent. You might say it's a silent border, though. I mean, if everyone is accepted into the trusted trader scheme, or it becomes pretty semi-automatic, and the EU doesn't go heavy on checks, it may become a silent, soft, seamless border, GB to NI, as obviously every unionist would want. I still, if I was, in your position as a unionist loyalist, I would be concerned. I'd still want answers to that question. What happens if UK law begins to diverge from EU law in terms of trading standards? What happens to those firms in Northern Ireland? Which side of the fence do they have to go on? Because that is not addressed in the document.
Yeah, and it's expected or anticipated that the UK would diverge away from us, contrary to that promise contained within Article 6 of the Act of the Union, that people from right around this United Kingdom, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, should be treated in exactly the same way. In other words, that we would be all on an equal footing. Jon Tonge, I think we've done it within time. Thanks very much for coming along, John. Just would you come back again to talk about? We touched on this. We've never got that far, but there's no use arguing if you haven't got a solution to the problems. And I believe that there are solutions to the problems that faces us right here. Equitable solutions that would literally put the Brexit shenanigans to rest. And I honestly believe that from the bottom of my heart. We talked about a thing that is happening in Liverpool. You're a professor in the University of Liverpool, and it's called a free port zone. John, would you come back and maybe we'll talk slightly about that? I know you're not an expert on it, but and thank you very much for putting me in the right direction to talk about another guy. But would you come back and have a chat about that at some stage?
I'd be delighted to, John. Yeah, be delighted to. Yeah,
John, thanks very much. Look, you've been of great help to us, and I hope to see you in the summer. We'll take you to some more of let you see some of the culture, and maybe as you do.
I look forward to it. Thanks, John.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Now, bye bye. So there you go, people. It's interesting to go through those tests now. I mean, we at Restore UK have been claiming from those tests came out, and I'm going to pop it up onto our screen here, is that any new arrangements. Now, this was written by the DUP. This was written by the DUP. This was written by the guy, is it Richard Bulick, from within the DUP, and it was written with compromise in mind. Now, I just want to remind people of something that Jeffrey Donaldson would have done on the protocol rally stages. Now remember who Jon Tonge is there, and he largely agrees with our analysis here at Restore UK. And John, believe it or not, hasn't got any skin in the game to be agreeing with us. John is only saying things from his. He's a professor of politics, and he's saying that this is the way that he reads things. That the DUP's tests were written with compromise in mind, and that was even before that they knew what was in that deal. What the framework was based upon, it was based upon these tests. It was written to try to satisfy these tests. But as you will see, that it isn't hard to satisfy those tests, because they're written in a way that they could mean one thing to one person and they could mean completely the opposite to another person. Why were they written in that way? Why did your political leaders write them in that way? Why, under Jeffrey Donaldson's leadership, were those tests actually put forward? People, I mean, I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it very plainly, is that those tests were written so that you could be swindled, so that the DUP could pull the wool over the eyes of their electorate. Make no mistake. Make no mistake. The DUP have other agendas. The DUP have other things in mind. That Jeffrey Donaldson has the national interest in mind, and it just so happens that that national interest is not the same interests as British Unionists here in Northern Ireland. So without labouring on that point, I think that it's said best when we have an expert actually clarifying those points, as Jon Tonge did. But let's remember the only mandate that the DUP have, the only mandate. This is the mandate that the people give them. This was the promises on the protocol rally stages by Jeffrey Donaldson before that he got your vote in the last assembly elections. Let's play this. Let's remind ourselves of the DUP's only mandate.
To stand together, united in our determination that the protocol must go and our democratic rights as British citizens should be fully restored. Thank you.
I want to be clear to the House that this is not about scrapping the protocol. Our aim is to deliver on the protocol's objectives.
The statement today is a welcome, if overdue, step. That is a significant move towards addressing the problems created by the protocol and getting power sharing based upon a cross-community consensus up and running again.
Our aim is to deliver on the protocol's objectives.
So the protocol must go. The democratic right of the people of Northern Ireland should be fully respected or restored. I'm going to come to the live chat in a few moments. We're not looking to keep this screen open for too long, because I think that we've done our job this evening. I think that we've had success in explaining what it is that the DUP are actually doing. Now, I believe right now, right here, I'm looking straight into this camera, and I believe that the DUP have some questions to answer. I believe that every unionist should ask those questions. Right now, we're working on understanding who that it is that the DUP's ruling executive are. There's 12 of them. There's 12 of them. Now, we've got quite a few names, but we don't have fully all of those 12. And if anyone knows who those ruling executive are, I'm asking you to furnish Restore UK with those names. And I'll tell you why we're doing this, is that what we want to do is that we want to show a little panel of who these people are. We want to show who is minded to compromise Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom, who that it is that is prepared to give, ready, there's an economic union, there's a political union, and what they're wanting to do is to give full governance of the economic union to the EU, give full governance, separating Northern Ireland from England, Scotland and Wales. And those 12 people, and I'm going to say this again, based on the mandate that Jeffrey Donaldson had, his mandate was the protocol has to go. the democratic right of the people of Northern Ireland, he said, should be fully respected. Now, even those words are constructive ambiguity, but we got the picture. He was trying to fool you by saying that the protocol had to go. Remember, this is what John says, that the Windsor framework, are you ready? I'm going to pop it up here. The Windsor framework is AKA Protocol Mark II. Now, that's a professor of politics telling you that the Windsor framework is Protocol Mark II. So the protocol has to go, and the democratic right of the people of Northern Ireland should be fully restored. That means that we get the same Brexit as people in England, Scotland, and Wales, and nothing else will be satisfactory to the people of Northern Ireland. Nothing else. They're out consulting at the minute. They're out creating an opinion poll in where that they'll come back and say that the people of Northern Ireland want them to operate within this deal, contrary to the democratic mandate that they got. The real poll was last year when people sent them into that assembly. And when people voted for them, when people voted up for them based on the promises that were being made on the protocol rally stages. That is the only mandate that the DUP have, and we intend reminding them that that is their mandate. They don't have the authority to do a dirty deal behind the backs of people of Northern Ireland, no matter how many community groups that they tell that they're going back into Stormont, no matter who or what they tell or say. The mandate that they have is the protocol has to go, and that the democratic right of the people of Northern Ireland has to be fully restored. We will rest there. Let's go to the live chat before that is that we close down. So anyway, it's all spin. We agree with this man here. It's all spin. I'll just pop up a question here. So John, do you think there would be these problems if we were still under direct rule here in Northern Ireland? Well, we've learned that people that call themselves conservatives and unionists, well, they are neither conservative nor are they unionists. But we have rights. We have rights from within. We are part of this United Kingdom, and we have rights as British citizens in the United Kingdom. And as per, well, what they disapplied was the Article 6 of the Act of the Union, which said that citizens in this United Kingdom, that everyone should be on an equal footing. And that's an equal footing, but we're not on an equal footing anymore. So what we have to do, and I'm going to borrow a phrase here from Jerry Adams, and I don't like to borrow phrases, but it's a fact, is that, you know, we need to use rights to break these so-called conservatives and unionists, these so-called leaders who pretend to respect your vote, who pretend to work for and on behalf of you. We need to use our rights. This is now, and you've heard me saying just a lot of weeks ago, and now you're beginning to understand what it was that we were talking about back then when we were saying that this is now a rights-based fight. Our rights has been removed when the Act of the Union has been disapplied. We are not on an equal footing with people in England, Scotland, and Wales, and that is our right. And how dare our so-called political leaders, Jeffrey Donaldson, how dare he take it upon himself, and him and his 12 executive members of the DUP, how dare they contemplate doing away with my rights or your rights or any other United Kingdom citizens' rights? It isn't there within their gift to compromise on my rights or your rights. And we see what we're doing within their 7 tests. They're fooling you. They're trying to fool you. Anyway, we don't want to get into a huge fight with unionists here in Northern Ireland. But when is enough enough? When are we going to stand up to these weak-willed charlatans who are they're okay. They're okay. Jeffrey Donaldson, Sir Jeffrey Donaldson, trade envoy to Cameroon, Jeffrey Donaldson, trade envoy to Egypt, Jeffrey Donaldson, director for the Centre for Democracy and Peace, Jeffrey Donaldson. Jeffrey Donaldson has so many things plied upon him that I don't believe that there's been anyone in the history of unionism in Northern Ireland that has had that many pleasantries bestowed upon them. And ask yourself a question why. Ask yourself why that it was that Edwin Poots got elected to be leader of the DUP and the media didn't like him, the establishment didn't like him, and soon after, well, he was put out and Jeffrey just walked into that job. Jeffrey wasn't elected into that job, and Jeffrey isn't going to be taking me or anyone that I know somewhere where we do not want to go. It's not within the DUP's gift to agree on this Windsor Betrayal Act, this Protocol Mark II, as Jon Tonge would have framed it, the Windsor Framework, aka Protocol Mark II. Jeffrey Donaldson, you have only one mandate. The protocol has to go, and the democratic right of the people of Northern Ireland has to be fully restored. So there we go, people. There we go. I think we did our job this evening. I think we got what we wanted. John's a good guy. Jon is, I'm just going to say a live and let live fella. He spent a bit of time with us a few years ago on the 12th. We had a day out with Jon, and he was trying to understand our culture. We spent time up in Ballymoney, County Antrim, with some friends that we have. And we had a great time, and I formed a fair relationship there with Jon. And I have to say, I see Jon as a friend, and I'm going to say fair play to Jon for actually telling the truth this evening. The truth has to be told, and that's the type of Jon. He's not the type of fella to put a good gloss on it. Yes, he did try to explain away the first question: when is it ever right for 3 constituent parts of the United Kingdom to be treated differently than 1 constituent part, yet they all were posed the same question in the same democratic referendum? Why is it ever right whenever the winners of that referendum, the 17.4 plus million people who took part in that referendum and who were the major vote in that referendum, when is it ever right for a section of that 17.4 million people to be denied democracy? Because that's what it boils down to, and that's what Jeffrey Donaldson was saying in the protocol rally stages, that the democratic right of the people of Northern Ireland, it has to be fully restored. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It has to be fully restored. And that is the hill that unionism should be prepared to die upon. So we've came to a close. I think we've done our job. Let's play us out with some of our, I'm going to say something from our culture, something that's going to put a smile on people's face, because I feel good about what we just done there. I feel good that we can now present this to the DUP, that we were right. We feel vindicated whenever a professor of politics tells us that our political analysis with reference to DUP 7 test, well, largely it was right. Largely it was written in constructive ambiguity. Largely their 7 tests were written for compromise, and they didn't even know the text of the deal. So they were compromising before that they knew what the deal was. If that's what leaders are, people, well, who needs? I don't know. If that's what leaders are, I don't know. Our enemies would treat us better than that. And I'm saying that, jokingly. So here's what we're going to do: is we're going to play us out with something from our culture that will put a smile on everyone's face. If you just bear with me for a second, I'll go through my videos and we'll play something that, well. So what's the solution, people? What is the solution from here on in? We need to demand that we are respected by our political leaders, our so-called political leaders. We need to demand to them, we need to insist that they only have one mandate, that this fake poll that they're conducting right now when they're discussing this Protocol Mark II with people out in the community, and they're going to come back and they're going to say, well, we consulted with it. This is what the people want. This really isn't what the people want. This most definitely is not what the people want. The people want their vote to be registered. The people want to be reinstated as full citizens of the United Kingdom. Yet again, all the people want is to live in peace and to have politicians who aren't liar-politicians, who aren't swindlers, who don't participate in spin, swindle, and fudge. That's all the people want. That's all the people want. So here we go.
From here tonight with blood and thunder, I want to see every tonight. Women.
I just have to move this forward because there's some language in here that we don't want to have right now. Here we go. I'm just looking for the appropriate part to start. Here we go.